Morning, good afternoon, good evening. The face of Brett, Brett as he calls himself, I think it's a familiar face and voice to many Zimbabweans on many WhatsApp groups. Here is one individual who makes me laugh at myself and my fellow countrymen. Many people have been following him because I think what he's saying is true. Some of it is something that we say to ourselves, but do not dare say it out loud. Today, he gave in this video, he's saying the usual things which I think is worth listening to and paying attention to. I'll just play a short clip of it.
Saka, that former spokesperson, Kwanas, former deputies, Binti, Welshman, a couple of other people, if one will say, Vatengis, they are now Vatengis struggle. At what point are we going to ask ourselves, why is the president always appointing Masiaio? Why? Long ago, we had a party that had structures, you had to vote and all those kind of things. So we can understand if you say, no, look, the president doesn't appoint, the people appoint via Congress. So the people appointed CIO agents because they voted for them. But this party did not have any of those abilities. The president appointed everyone. Saka, president aka appoint ama-CIO asingazivi. If that's the case, then surely the president was not fit to be president because they are continually appointing CIOs. Or is the president a CIO himself and he is just simply appointing his fellow work colleagues to control the opposition? You see, in Zimbabwe, basa re-opposition ndere kunyaradza vanhu. Ndo basa re-opposition. Opposition ndere kunyaradza vanhu. Kana uri mu-opposition ukataura nezve-revolution sezvandinoita inini, unodzingwa, you are suspended or you are expelled. Handiti. Ndo zvinoitika. Try it. Enda ku-leadership yako kwauri ikoko mu-opposition. Enda unoti no, zve-politics taakusiyana nazvo. Taakuda kuisa vanhu muroad, taakuda kubvisa regime by force. Enda unotaura izvozvo mustructure mako ku-head office kweparty yako, enda unotaura izvozvo. If you are still a party member after 1 month, uya undiudze izvozvo. So what happens is the regime plans one election in advance. So what's going to happen now is when they have a political event or a political change, someone will come or an event will happen. When that event or that person comes, it gives hope to people. So people will say, let's rather wait the 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, and that election, the one that's coming, that one, 2028, 2028. 2028, yogosvika, mogomamiswa election, mogonzi sadhaki, mogoti tarigwa, mogoendesa kukoti, mogodai, 2 years dzopera, 1 year, 1 month, 1 year, 6 months dzopera, muchingo manyisana mapepa, what. After that, an event happens, munhu wochinja, kana kuti zvinhu zvochinja, you change a party, you change my colors, you change zvimwe zvinhu. All of a sudden, people are like, 3 more years until election, tomira election. Ndo zviri kuitika muZimbabwe izvozvo. Muri kuvhariswa time.
Well, I could not agree with him more. I think the opposition in Zimbabwe has been to silence people, to keep them quiet, always keep them hopeful that tomorrow change is around the corner, when in reality, there's no change. However, where I do differ, and which is why I thought I would produce this video to respond to that, is Brett's solution. Street protests, much less an armed struggle, is not the solution. I emphasize, street protests or armed struggle is not the solution. The story goes that during India's fight to end British rule, the Congress party leaders or the Indian leadership at the time were confronted with the option of, should we wage an armed struggle to end British rule? They asked themselves, what kind of leaders will an armed struggle throw up? A rhetorical question, which they followed up with, would those people, those men and women, be the sort of people who would want to lead independent India? They decided not to wage an armed struggle. We in Zimbabwe, we had that option too. I don't think the question was ever posed. And if it was posed, we have the answer. Our armed struggle threw up Robert Gabriel Mugabe, Emerson Mnangagwa, and all these Zanu PF thugs. Zimbabwe is a failed state today because for the last 44 years since our independence, the country has been ruled by corrupt, incompetent, and murderous thugs. That is what the armed struggle threw up. That is the leadership that the armed struggle threw up. Can anyone tell me that a new armed struggle will not throw up leaders of similar caliber? Of course it will. Why are we then repeating the same mistake over and over again? But most significantly, I would ask that person, in the last 44 years, did we have any opportunity at all to end the Zanu PF dictatorship? And if that person has been following Zimbabwe's politics, they will have to admit, yes, there were many golden opportunities to end the Zanu PF dictatorship. None more so than the 2008 to 2013 GNU. Morgan Tsvangirai and his MDC friends had the golden opportunity to implement the democratic reforms which would have stopped Zanu PF rigging the elections. They failed to implement even one reform. Why? Easy. Mugabe bribed them with the trappings of high office. And the rest, as they say, is history. So my question then to Brad and anybody else who thinks street protests is, why would you want to go on the street? And remember, Zanu PF prides itself in its use of violence. Zanu de Europa. We have seen people going on the street, peaceful, trying to march peacefully. Zanu PF does not know that. This is a regime that has been programmed. Anything, street protests that are not organized by the party are considered to be violent protests, and they must be crushed. We've seen this happen again and again. Yes, I'll be the first one also to admit that some of our opposition leaders, at least, have never, while they've said, oh, we want to hold peaceful protests, but they genuinely wanted a confrontation. They wanted violence. They believe the only solution will come by having violent street protests. The leaders themselves, when it gets violent, they usually disappear like mist in the warming African sun. And they leave everybody else to deal with the problem. Zanu PF has maintained a well-armed, ruthless police force, CIO, army, and so forth. And to make sure that those people are totally committed to the violent solution to keep Zanu PF in power, it's all the top brass in those sectors are part of the Zanu PF filthy rich ruling elite. They now have an invested interest in keeping Zanu PF in power. I think street protest is not the answer at all. The answer has been staring us in the face. We must stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. The opposition, the MDC, was elected with the primary purpose to implement the democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. They had the golden opportunity to do so during the GNU. They failed to do so. Just because Morgan Changira and company sold out on reforms and they've been participating in these flawed elections, knowing fully well that they are flawed, knowing fully well that by participating they give Zanu PF legitimacy, does not mean that there is nobody else who can implement those reforms. All we've got to do is find those people. I think the first task at the present moment, given the present political situation in Zimbabwe, where we have now established beyond all reasonable doubt that Zimbabwean elections are so flawed, so illegal, that you will not change the result. If you participate, you only give Zanu PF legitimacy. The only solution which the opposition of any competence should be advocating is that people should not participate in a process just to give Zanu PF legitimacy. The opposition that we presently have, and I agree with Brett here, that the opposition we have in Zimbabwe now is paid by the regime to be the opposition, to keep people's hopes up, to encourage them to participate in these flawed elections. to give the regime legitimacy. I've said here and on many other platforms that the MDC, Triple C, particularly post the GNU, have become Zanu PF, Team B in all but name. And if you're Team B, you play for Team A to win, for Team A to have legitimacy. You don't care about yourself winning. You know you are not going to win. You're paid to play so that Team A wins. And then you share the spoils of power. So the only competent thing that people can do right now is stop participating in these flawed elections, which they know Zanu PF is set to rig, which they know those opposition politicians who are participating in them are doing so out of greed. Why millions of Zimbabweans have been so easily conned into participating in these flawed elections again and again beggars belief. Already we are seeing, as Brett is correctly pointed out there, some people are already saying, 2028, that is the voice of the double agent. Zanu PF has got well-paid double agents in the opposition who are there to give people hope, to encourage them to participate, to make them believe that this time they will win, no matter what. Immediately after the elections, they've been rigged. They suddenly are quiet. They don't come forward to explain what happened. They knew that the elections were going to be rigged. They knew that by participating it gives Zanu PF legitimacy. They've accomplished what they were paid to do, and they withdraw completely. They evaporate. They disappear. So the people do not even have the chance to ask them, you are the one who was encouraging us to participate in these flawed elections. What happened here? They never explain. They never bother to stay long enough to explain. This is what the people of Zimbabwe are facing. I think to resort to street protests, much less an armed struggle, is no more than somebody opting to use a hammer to kill a mosquito. The chances are, even if you do kill that mosquito, you break a bone or do some such serious harm to yourself or whoever. Why use a sledgehammer? Why use a hammer to kill a mosquito? And the chances are, in fact, you'll miss. The mosquitoes are cunning bugs. You do not need a hammer to kill a mosquito. We do not need a violent street protest, which will only be welcomed by the regime. Give it an excuse for using violence. We do not need to participate in flawed elections. It's that simple. We should not be so easily conned into participating in flawed elections again and again. So flawed that even SADC last year turned around and said these elections are flawed, illegal. I mean, surely Zimbabweans should have seen that themselves. But we were so easily conned. As long as we have got people who are so easily conned, Zimbabwe will not change. And I don't think we need to go into another cycle of violence, street protests or worse, to end Zanu PF dictatorship. We only have to start thinking for a change. We should not be so easily conned. And we have been conned for the last 24 years by MDC leaders. I repeat, MDC leaders were elected by the people for the primary purpose of implementing the democratic changes necessary to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. After 24 years, they failed to implement even one token reform. And worse still, they've been participating in flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy. Surely, it's not rocket science. People should realize what is going on here and start following these MDC triple C leaders blindly like sheep. The worst thing that can happen 2028 is for people to say exactly what Brett was saying there. 2028, no winner, no winner, takato winner. No. If you participate in 2028 with no reforms, you will only repeat what happened in 2023, which was a repeat of what happened in 2020 in 2008 and 18, which in itself was a repeat of what happened in 2013. When will you ever learn? Food for thought. Thank you very much for listening, and have a good day.